Hello, everyone. I'm Mary Petoniak from Educational Testing Service in the United States, and I am facilitating this session this morning. Before I introduce our speaker, I just want to review the meeting protocol. Please mute your audio and turn off your video during the meeting. Please enter your name and country in the chat so we know how many people are here and where they are from. If you have questions during the presentation, please enter your question in the chat, again, including your name and country. And this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the website in the members section. So I just wanted to share those things with you. It is now my great pleasure to introduce a friend and former colleague at ETS, Alina von Davier. She is Chief of Assessment at Duolingo and, oops, I just lost my notes here. Chief Assessment at Duolingo, and my dogs are barking because they're so excited that Alina is going to be talking. Founder and CEO of EdAstra Technology. At Duolingo, Alina and her team operate at the forefront of computational psychometrics. Her current research interests involve developing psychometric methodologies in support of digital first assessments, such as the Duolingo English test, using techniques incorporating machine learning, data mining, Bayesian inference methods, and stochastic processes. So this morning, or excuse me, it's morning to Alina and me. Today, Alina will be talking about educational measurement in the 21st century, meet digital first assessment. So welcome, Alina.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, organizers, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you. Actually, this conference was on my list for 2020. Obviously, that didn't happen, so here I am. Thank you so much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share my work and my teamwork with you. So I'm sharing my screen now. Please bear with me. And I hope now that everyone can see my slides.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for confirming. So as Mary mentioned before, I work with Duolingo as the Chief of Assessment. Duolingo has been a pioneer in this area, introducing and developing the first digital first assessments. Over time, especially in this year, we have seen other assessment becoming digital first, or at least attempting to become digital first, which I think I welcome that trend. Because Duolingo is a small company, I want to share a little bit about it. And I don't know how many of you heard of it. It's primarily a company that supports learning of many languages, and they are free. And it has also an assessment associated with that, but the assessment at this point is for the English language. And in both mission statements, you can see that the idea is we are trying to develop the best education in the world and make it universally available. And the same for the assessment, but the point here is to use technology to lower barriers. So the outline of my presentation today is to give an introduction and talk what is an old normal, what is the new normal, and what is the role of the pandemic in all of this. And then I will introduce digital first assessments and what we understand by that and why we think, and I think that are definitely the 21st century version of assessments. And then I will talk about the theoretical ecosystem of frameworks that together with my team I've been developing this year, and we wrote a paper about that, but actually a lot of the ideas have been around for a few years in work. And I will continue talking about the role of computational models and different types of algorithms for this type of assessments, both for test development, but also for scoring and for modeling and interpreting the data. And I will give 2 examples from our work. Both are related to the Duolingo English test. One example is going to be focused on how we use automatic item generation. And the other one is going to be on automatic quality assurance for the assessment. So what do we understand by old normal, new normal, and what's the role of the pandemic and all of that? Well, educational assessment, as most of us know them, are being redefined now. We are still used with high stakes assessment that are given on paper in test centers. And obviously last year, and it continues unfortunately in this year, we've seen that all of these activities truly came to a standstill. And that is problematic for our industry in assessment, and we just were not able to deliver them. So at the same time, the technology truly changed the way we've been interacting, the way our children studied, the way teachers taught. Pretty much our whole life moved more or less online. I mean, here we are, experiencing a version of a conference in a virtual environment. So our life became mediated by technology. Like it or not, it's a reality of our life. So if we stand back and ask ourselves, what is that we would like the assessment to measure? We need to consider that in addition to the traditional elements that are necessary for the education of our children, reading, writing, arithmetic, in our case, language abilities, but all of this needs nowadays to be digitally mediated. Otherwise, they can be less relevant as they could and less valid, therefore. For example, we are also looking at ways in which we can embed interactive activities, collaborative activities, interpersonal skills, but primarily everything we do needs to be digitally mediated and needs to develop opportunities for measurement that are familiar for this new generation of test takers. We need to acknowledge that the new normal has been coexisting with the old normal for a long while, actually. Just let's take Duolingo. Duolingo has been around for a few years. It's just that in the past almost 2 years, it really went through the roof in terms of demand, primarily because it was ready for this type of technology mediated life. But also other companies and other assessment out there have been having or developing features that are more aligned with this technology mediated life. As the quote attributed to William Gibson says, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed yet. So what are digital first assessments? Well, first of all, they are digital from many perspectives. They have a digitally mediated construct. They are designed with computational models and algorithm in mind from the beginning to the end, and I will say more about that. They are evidence-centered, and they are valid and reliable like all the other high-stakes assessments. Another feature is that they are very well integrated. The infrastructure is extremely fluid so that you can actually administer tests all over the world 24/7. You need a really sophisticated delivery platform. And you need that delivery platform to work very well with the algorithm behind the test administration, say an adaptive test. And as well, and the adaptive test in turn needs to work really well with the theoretical frameworks that support the assessment from the validity perspective. Also, this type of digital first assessment have various tools that need to be integrated and work smoothly with each other. Another very specific feature of digital first assessments is the emphasis on the test taker experience. All of us, or most of us, have a smartphone. Nowadays, the technology is around us, and we switch among apps, for example, without putting a lot of thought of where do I need to click, to press, and in order to find my way around into a new app. All of them have an intuitive way and interface to accommodate our needs, even for a very diverse population as we are. Now, some of that concept that is called, user experience translated into assessments. And there is actually a technical term, delightful experience. So we at Duolingo, and I'm sure we will see more of that in other companies, are striving to build a delightful test-taking experience. Well, of course, what we mean by that is to make the test-taking experience as comfortable as is possible. Of course, we realize that it's a test no matter what, but doesn't mean that it has to be difficult to take it. So we are striving to emphasize test-taker experience. And by offering it anytime, anywhere, in a very flexible way, we emphasize and we support this experience. Another feature is that the test is taken online, and the experience of analyzing the behavior of the test taker is also happening in a remote and asynchronous way. And I can talk more about that if there are questions around proctoring and evaluation of the test. So what I want to show you here, so that is the main message that I would like to emphasize with this slide. I know it's a bit heavier. The main message here is that, in our opinion, my opinion, and my colleagues here at Duolingo, is that the best solutions for assessments are those where we take advantages of the human expertise and the ability of the machine to scale up. And this is how we think about the whole testing paradigm. So the AI algorithm in particular are part of the fabric of the test, from the item development to scoring. Now, the design is conducted by humans. The review is conducted by humans. The design of the pilot studies are all done by humans. And of course, there is a significant theoretical groundwork that is necessary to identify what are the constructs that the test should measure. But generating and scaling up a number of items is often done with machines. And similarly for the administration, I mentioned before, having a really good delivery platform is key for a digital first assessment. And for scoring, we have similar tools, automatic tools with human design and human review. And the test taker experience is at the core of every decision. So this is quite different from other assessments I worked on in the past in other companies, where we were primarily driven by psychometric properties. So in this case, we want to have the psychometric properties that are necessary. However, they do not drive the decision. And I think this is a really important difference here. Keep the standards and emphasize the experience. That's our mantra. This summer, we just published a paper. I would invite you to check it out. And it is now on our website for the Duolingo English test. However, we think of it as a more general framework, ecosystem of framework for all assessment that are digital first, and they can, and you can see the parallels to many other assessments, even STEM assessment. So here is just, I will not go into details for this ecosystem, and I would invite you to check it out. We did our best to explain how we think about digital first assessment and what are the features that we believe are important to work together. And we don't talk only about individual frameworks, we talk about an ecosystem that has all these frameworks integrated and working with each other. As I mentioned before, everything is driven by the test taker experience, and we expect social impact. Remember, the mission of the test is to improve and offer opportunities for test takers all over the world. And we want to use the technology to make that possible by keeping the cost low and at the same time also making sure that the test is secure. So what you see in the middle in these circles are the main frameworks that help us build the test. It's a design framework, a learning and assessment design framework. It's a measurement framework. This is where we think as in an evidence-centered design, but an expanded version, and I will say more about that, why expanded version of ECD. Then we have a validation and measurement framework where computational psychometry is coming to place for the new type of data that we receive. And these are the inferences that we will want to do. We want to build based on this assessment, but they are also influencing what comes into the design, what comes into modeling, and what parameters to consider. Test security is extremely important for an assessment that is given online from anywhere in the world and at any time. But the way we think of security must be different, obviously. You can't just take something that is happening in a test center and just try to put it online. So everything has to work together again. And decisions that are made to support test security are also part of the way in which, for example, we design the test. Using a cat with a huge item pool is one way to support test security. And I will say more about that. So I will go a little bit through some of these elements in the ecosystem that support the digital first assessment. The first one is expanded evidence-centered design. This is also, you can check the paper, is online, easy to find, with Meirav Ariel Talia as the first author, and we worked on that a few years ago with my previous team at ACT Next. So what we are talking about? We have a learning and assessment design framework. We know what we would like to develop. And you can think of going from left to right in terms of how do we put together this assembly model? What are the proficiencies that we want to develop, the KSA, the knowledge, skills, and abilities? And what would be a traditional, or should be an evidence model that supports the measurement of this KSA? And then we need to design the task in a way that supports this model. So this was the ECD part. Now, where does the expanded part comes in? In all places, actually. So first of all, and the most important part is in the KSA themselves, in the measuring the ability. If we want to include learning as part of the design, then we need to assume that the ability changes. We hope that people become better as they go through the system and the teaching program, and they learn and they know more. So this is the first change. Another change is related to the task, design of the task. Well, nowadays, especially in a digital format, we are able to collect information about the process of responding to a question, and not only correct or incorrect responses. We are also able nowadays to collect information about the time, how much time someone spent on an item. And we perhaps are able to integrate different features of the task to support a more complex type of evidence. For example, if we have a chat, then in that case, it will be pulling out of the responses from more than one person in order to make particular inferences. So these elements were not part of the ECD when ECD was developed. So now all of these expansions, if you want, are definitely elements that support the digital first assessment. And here under the observational evidence model is also where computational psychometrics come to play, that provides a framework for dealing with much more complex multimodal data and complex latent variables that need to be measured, abilities and skills of the students. Now, I will go to another of these frameworks, and this is computational psychometrics. If you want to read a bit more, this is one source in the Journal of Educational Measurement. I introduced the concept in 2015. So by now, 6 years later, there have been quite a lot of work in this area. But specifically to digital first assessment, here is how computational psychometrics come into place. Computational psychometrics is a blend of psychometrics and theories and machine learning that are based on large data set, machine learning tools. The idea is that we use the psychometric principles and in some cases constraints to guide the way machine learning algorithms can extract information, valuable information from big data sets. It's psychometric centered and is meant to help in educational and psychological measurements. It's theory-based and offers a modern conceptualization of the construct, including a digitally mediated construct, as I mentioned before. But this primarily is interdisciplinary. It's also data-driven because all machine learning algorithms require large data sets. And this is where the traditional psychometrics has difficulties identifying or even developing the right models. And it is algorithm empowered. It's adaptive, it's computationally efficient as well. How do we do that? Well, the idea is that in a complex assessment, we have at the basis of our measurement a very complex data collection, multifaceted, multimodal, very rich data collection. Often this type of data, that level of granularity from pixels, if we have videos, to sound, if we have recordings, to correct or incorrect responses or process data. So all of that, we'll call that telemetry. Now, if we are faced with this type of data in a traditional psychometrics, we would not quite know what to do with it, because traditionally we learn only to go from the highest level, cognitive learning and psychological constructs, and the data, the telemetry. We did not learn in traditional psychometrics how to deal with the in-between part. So this is where the computational models come to place. Computational models based on machine learning algorithm help us to extract the relevant features out of this telemetry, build higher level construct that after that can go back in the cognitive learning and psychometric models. There is a book that will be coming out soon on computational psychometrics. I am one of the co-editors with Bob Mislevy and Jiangang Hao. So stay tuned, the book will come out very soon. It's with Springer Verlag, so you can check that out.
Alina, you have about 5 more minutes, just so you know. 5,
Uh,
7.
okay. All right, well, so that's, thank you. Obviously, I accounted for about 10 more, but we'll do. So digital first test development then. What's the difference in how we develop tests? And these are the principles that we use, so I will skip that a little. But I will talk a bit more about the design and iteration for item development. What is different? I told you before that we use machine learning to scale up the production of items. So the way we do it is we start with the assessment planning and design. Here is where the human experts come into place. Then we will use NLP, natural language processing, and machine learning to model this information and use the information from the experts. We generate the items. What we are using right now is a tool called GPT-3, which is a huge language model that works really well. And then we do pre-piloting and analysis on this data, and we keep iterating until we obtain the right type of features. So we do that with test takers in specific research situations. We build a communication to stakeholders. Then we do large scale piloting. And after that, once we have sufficient data, we will use a computational psychometric framework to estimate the difficulty parameter and scoring decisions. As an example, how we do things on the Duolingo English test. It is a digital first assessment, and it has all the features that I mentioned to you earlier before. It is meant to democratize access to education. It's scalable, using automatic item generation, creating huge item pools, and therefore secure the test content. It uses an online testing with remote and asynchronous proctoring that uses both the technology and human proctors. So it's highly secure. It uses automatic scoring, and it has a very, very speedy score reporting. We are talking here about 36 hours for score reporting. Anytime, anywhere in the world, you get pretty much everything in 36 hours. And as I wanted to show you an example, I might not get to it, it employs an automatic quality assurance that we just...
Alina, you can show the example. That's fine.
Yeah, we'll see. We will see how far we got. So now I'm watching my, my watch. And it's a CAT. It's a computer adaptive test, which makes it shorter and efficient while still being accurate. So it was really fit for the global disruption. As you can see here, it really went through the roof last year, and it continues to do so because it's extremely well suited to take care of what's happening in our lives nowadays. It is research-based. The team is growing, and we are now finally having the time to actually start writing papers about those. So I will skip this. I invite you to check more about it. But this is the first example I wanted to share with you. What is the traditional test development? And what we are trying to do? In a traditional test development, you have expert written test items, then you have thousands of people taking the test as part of, or the items as part of a pilot. Then you do psychometric analysis, and then you build your pool. But this is quite time consuming and extremely expensive, and therefore the cost for the test would go up. So what we do is a bit different. This is still related to how the test is built. So ideally, what we are trying to do is to find the good match between items and people and create an item pool that, that contains the items from all abilities. And we are trying to bypass the first part, the one that requires a lot of data as big pilot data. So how we do that? We start with expert annotated CFR text and word lists. CFR is a common European framework of reference because this is an English test. So we use that framework to guide our test development. We also use statistical models for estimating the difficulty estimation aligned with the common European framework. We use natural English language sources. And then, as I mentioned before, we use these item generation techniques to scale up this model. Fortunately, that leads to a large pool of items that are ready for the CAT administration and that have been aligned with the CFR. And then we update these item estimates as we go along. So again, the test design and construction is matching the buckets in the CFR. We have from the simplest level to the most complicated, more advanced level C2. And on the left side here, you have the Duolingo scale. So we have annotations by subject matter experts. We have a machine learning alignment, a database regular updates of the difficulty by recalibrating all the time. And we use what we call the FAB review, fairness and bias review, that is also done by human experts. My second example is on automatic quality assurance for assessment. We built this year actually a tool that uses dashboards to illustrate and check for various trends, especially undesired trends. Moreover, this tool sends us direct messages on Slack and email if any anomaly happens in the system. Remember, this is a test that takes place everywhere in the world, every day, at every moment of the day or the night. So it's really important to have an automatic system that points out if there is a problem somewhere in the world. So we build this system, we also started to present it and write papers about it. So the idea here is to support the test validity. And how do we do that? We look especially at comparability, we look for trends, and we look for anything that is anomalous in the data. And then we review those. At the moment, we review those once a week. But of course, if the system sends any alarms, then we will all get and look at the data. So with this, we are supporting in many ways test security, but also we are supporting the claims of generalization, extrapolation, and fairness. So how does it work? It imports the data from the database. It calculates different statistics. And here is again where computational psychometrics has been very helpful, because the type of data that we receive is not part of traditional psychometrics. It's using time series and stochastic processes methodologies to compute these metrics. And then we use dashboards to visualize and see the plots. Now, just to give you an example here, more specific, how would differential item functioning work in this system? We say I have a logistic regression analysis and in a simpler terms, but we have quite some models that are much more complex than that. We flag the diff, identify the direction of the diff, we visualize it within Aqua, and we look at different subgroups. And then we have a human experts panel for fairness and bias review. And if the item is found to be faulty, then we revise it or retire it from the pool. So in conclusion, digital first assessments are here to stay. As we saw recently in the last months, many tests from different countries have started to incorporate features of digital first assessment. They started to be available at home. They started to be available with proctoring that is remote, and they started to have an adaptive feature so that the test becomes shorter and therefore more comfortable for the test takers to take. I believe we are seeing now a paradigm shift in how the assessment need to be thought through. We can't just take an assessment that was on paper and pencil and put it online. We need to rethink how the design and how everything should work. Digital first tests are in sync with the societal changes. You test the people the way they are expected to be tested, because it reflects the way they learn and the way they study and the way they work. And all of that, while it still meets the standards for high stakes tests. And again, if you are curious, on our website, we just posted about 2 weeks ago a document that reflects how our test meets the standards from ARA and CME and APA. About the Duolingo English test in particular, we are working on it. We keep an eye on it. It's reliable, it's valid, it's secure, it's efficient. And it also illustrates how artificial intelligence and psychometrics can come together for the best test takers experience. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing the questions.
Thank you very much, Alina. We are now going to go into the question and answer period, and Dennis Opos is going to facilitate that. And then in about 12 minutes, we will end the session. So Dennis?
Thanks very much, Mary. So as Mary said, you've got the opportunity now to ask questions. If you type something into the chat, I'll pick that up, and Dr. von Davier will be able to respond to it. And we've got a first question from Stuart's Jaw, down the road from me, so to speak. So Alina, can you unpack a little more the concept of a digitally mediated construct?
Yes, sure. Thank you for the question. So, for example, we have been debating for a language assessment whether having text-to-speech tools within the assessment is a valid way to interact with the test takers, and at the end have a conclusion that you actually had the evidence of test takers' ability to communicate and collaborate eventually with somebody, with an agent. And we believe at this point that yes, this is a valid way, because that's how we work in a digital environment. Another feature would be, this is an example, but another one would be the use of chat. So emulating chats, and within the chat, emulating communication with emojis seems to be extremely relevant for the new generation of test takers. And actually, this is being confirmed now, but I've seen it before in my previous work on collaborative problem solving, where we realized that people use emojis interacting with each other. And then we observed in specific studies a synchronicity in their facial feature, in their reactions and emotions. So you would see someone smiling after seeing an emoji about smiley from the collaborative partners. So having ways in which we can integrate this online life experience into the assessments would help the assessment be more valid, in our opinion. Again, we have a paper about that. Please check it out. It's on the ecosystem. You can Google it and it's easy to find.
Thanks, Alina. Hope that helps, Stuart. Right, next question from Naveed Yusuf in Pakistan. Naveed asks, how are ability levels, KSA, reported back to learners and candidates? How elaborate is the feedback to learners?
This is a very good question. So we have, specifically for the DET at the moment, we do report the main total scores and report sub-scores. At the moment, we do not have a lot of feedback. We are working on that. But on the learning side, on the learning app in the company, obviously there is quite a well-defined feedback at each point of the learning experience. But we have 4 integrated subscores. So these are our ways of getting back valuable information to test takers.
Thank you. So next, another question from England is Bill Nisbet, who thanks you for your presentation and says, you mentioned security. How do you safeguard against cheating through impersonation without using proctoring activities that are unacceptably intrusive?
Well, this is definitely a loaded question. So I mean, the word unacceptably intrusive, I guess, has many ways of being defined. But I understand what you're saying. So an assessment, especially a high stakes assessment, is, in my opinion, a contract. You enter a contract and you do agree with different features of the contract in order to move forward. So it's not part, this type of assessment at this point is not part of your general school education. But that aside, how do we deal with impersonation? Well, I think we probably deal better with that than one would be able to deal in a test center. And the reason for that is that we use multiple ways of identifying the test takers, including the ID of the person. But then we have the person taking the test, and one of the tasks on the test in our test is an interview. So you get actually to see and listen to the person, which gives you access to voice eventually, and of course facial features that will be checked against the ID. We are compliant with GDPR, so we follow all the rules for test taker privacy. And so far we also pay cheaters. We pay very able people to go and try to cheat in different ways. This is not new. Everyone is doing that. And we do that on a regular basis because cheaters become better and better at cheating, and we become better and better at protecting ourselves, the same as it happens in a bank, the same as it happens in art museums. So it's a competition there, obviously. So we do have paid cheater on a regular basis, and I believe we will look quite good in all of those results based on what I've seen.
Thank you. Good. Right, it's back to Pakistan. Shehzad Jiva this time, who asks, could you please expand on ensuring the accuracy of scores through your model? Yes.
Sure. So what we do is, I mentioned, is a computer adaptive test, and we have traditional psychometric models to estimate that accuracy. We are also using, so that's part of actually what drives the decision around the test design. So is the accuracy. So that's not that different from how other computer adaptive tests work. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're looking for, but we have a high reliability and we strive for it. Again, you can check it online. We publish this in our technical manual. We have multiple item types, and we also look at the reliability by item types. So these are the elements perhaps that you are interested in: reliability and adaptive tests, and how accurate the adaptive test is. Now, because the test is adaptive, doing a split half reliability obviously has its limitations. So we developed new methodologies for looking even a bit more closely to that, and we use a retest reliability estimates by lag, by time between the retakes. It's a bit more complex model, again, involving time series, but yeah, we are quite satisfied with those numbers.
Thank you, Alina. I think we've just about got time to squeeze 2 more questions in. So Sarah Hughes says, how are you building stakeholder confidence in your AI scoring models? How do you approach explainability, interpretability of machine scores?
Yeah, so the design of the rubrics and of the features are all done by subject matter experts. And many of these features are features that are being used in all other approaches. For example, when you type on your word processor and you get suggestions, or when you use an automatic translation. So are similar type of features that have been tested in multiple areas. Now, what we do is we take those algorithms and we refine them and make them appropriate for our work. So we have multiple in this aqua that I presented before. We also look very carefully at all of these elements for monitoring the quality.
Thank you. Right, so finally, I think it's going to have to be, we've got a question from Cheryl Good in your part of the world, the US. What form of assessments does Duolingo focus its research on? More formative, summative, or other types of assessments? And what steps are they taking to eliminate bias, like racial bias, in AI testing?
So definitely we work in all those areas, formative, summative, other types of assessment as well, multiple languages. What steps we are taking to eliminate bias? That's definitely interesting. For a test of English, race, for example, is a bit less relevant as a variable. What is really relevant for a global test is more the native language, the country of origin, and the interaction of the two. So race could play a role, but in all of our analysis, this was not indicated as a risk factor. We still look at it nevertheless. But we do spend quite a lot of time on looking at country of origin and native language. And the approaches are, a lot of them are similar to psychometrics. Now you ask about the machine learning part in scoring. How do we do that? We ensure that the training data, that you heard this concept before, so say essays or responses which have been scored by humans, that we have a large and representative sample of this type of scored responses. And with that, we ensure that our model is not biased. But nevertheless, we do check it all the time through Aqua.
Thank you. Thanks to the questioners. Thanks so much for those very well detailed but quick responses, Alina. Thanks very much for that. Mary, over to you.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Thanks so much, Alina. It was great to see you and hear this presentation. We are now going to have a break of about 11 minutes. I'm not going to say the time we're coming back because it's different for everyone. But in 11 minutes, we will reconvene to have the annual general meeting, and that is for members only. So members are free to stay on Zoom. Dennis, we're going to say something.
I was only going to say, I think that people will have to log back in for the AGM.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So,
yes, we will close actually the session in a bit and I'll reopen it 5 minutes before the start.
All right. Thank you. I'm always glad when there's smarter people than me around. Okay. So thank you very much. Have a break, leave, and members come back in 10 minutes. Thank you,
everyone. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Anat.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alina.
Bye.